Welcome to the Remote Control Podcast, where we push the limits of the mind and uncover the hidden history of psychic intelligence, from ancient oracles who challenged kings to Cold War spies buried in secrecy. We dive into remote viewing, anomalous cognition, Project Stargate, missing aircraft, Soviet time mirrors, Mars sessions, and mysteries like Tunguska. This isn't science fiction, but documented files and first-hand accounts from programs that tried to weaponize the mind.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for, I think, one of the strangest and most ambitious projects of the entire Cold War. Forget missiles and satellites for a moment. We are diving into a full-blown race for psychic supremacy, and specifically, these devices the Soviets allegedly built to amplify the human mind. Kozyrev's Mirrors.
It absolutely sounds like something ripped from a pulp novel, doesn't it? But this research, it was rooted in some pretty serious theoretical physics and even more serious governmental anxiety.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is clear, right? We're going to take the sources you've provided and really unpack the science or the theory behind these things.
Exactly. We'll look at the radical theory, examine the bizarre claims of what happened to people inside them, and then, weigh it all with an objective eye against the skepticism from mainstream science.
And this isn't just some quirky historical footnote. I mean, what we're looking at is a chapter that shows the immense ambition and, frankly, the deep, deep paranoia that fueled the Cold War.
Oh, completely. Both superpowers were willing to pour money into concepts way outside conventional science.
All because they were terrified the other side might unlock the ultimate intelligence advantage, control of the mind itself.
And to really understand the mirrors, you have to start with the theory. You just have to. The devices, it's literally a physical representation of a very abstract idea. We have to talk about the architect, Nikolai Kozyrev.
Right, and Kozyrev wasn't some, fringe quack. He was a highly respected Soviet astrophysicist. He studied stars, celestial mechanics.
Yeah, for years. But he came to believe that standard physics was, incomplete. His ideas about the universe, and especially his concept of time, were absolutely radical for the 50s and 60s.
Oh, let's unpack that core hypothesis, because it underpins everything else.
Okay, so Kozyrev's core idea, the foundation for this whole mirror project, is that time is not just a dimension we use for measuring change.
Like on a clock.
Exactly. He thought it was a physical, energetic medium. He called it time energy. And he believed it was this active force that literally flows through the universe.
Wow. That's a staggering shift in perspective. We organize our whole lives around time calendars, schedules. Kozyrev is saying it's not just a ruler, it's an invisible, powerful river.
That's a perfect way to put it, an invisible river. And he believed this energy could be harnessed.
But how? If it's not electromagnetic, it's not gravity, how does it even interact with matter?
Well, he suggested this time energy flow is connected to fundamental processes like entropy, a star burning out, a chemical reaction. He thought these things were literally consuming or using time energy.
Okay.
And here's the key part from the sources. Because it's a form of energy, he believed it could be influenced, it could be focused.
Okay, that makes sense conceptually. If you can focus light with a lens or focus gravity with a huge mass, then Kozyrev must have believed there was a specific architecture you needed to capture and focus this flow of time energy.
Precisely. You nailed the analogy. The entire design of the mirrors was driven by that one idea. If you could build a structure that focused time energy, you could create a space where human consciousness, which he also thought interacted with this medium, would be enhanced.
And so if the force is this invisible energy, what did they actually build? This is where the physical device comes in. What did Kozyrev's mirrors actually look like?
They're very unique structures. You have to forget conventional glass mirrors. These were huge systems of highly reflective, lightweight metal, usually polished aluminum.
And they weren't meant to reflect light.
Right. Not visible light, no. They were designed to manipulate this hypothesized flow of time energy. And crucially, they had to be large enough for a person to comfortably sit or even lie down inside.
The geometry was everything. And this is where the details get so fascinating. Our sources talk about specific designs, not just simple cylinders. We're talking rolled reflective chambers, long tunnels, and even these elaborate spiral chambers. Why a spiral?
The shape was absolutely essential. Kozyrev's theory suggested that time flows rotationally or in a spiral. So the geometry of the mirrors, especially those curled and spiral designs, was meant to mimic and then concentrate that flow.
And what else?
On top of that, these shapes were believed to reduce or block electromagnetic interference from the outside world to create a kind of focused, pure, energetic environment inside.
So it's like they were building a non-electromagnetic Faraday cage, but for the mind.
That's a great way to think about it.
The idea being the person sits inside, their consciousness is already tuned to this time energy, and now gets this massive boost from the focus flow inside the mirrors. And that boost is supposed to show up as enhanced perception.
That is exactly the mechanism they were hoping to test. And this closed-loop system of radical physics and, well, radical parapsychology, it led directly to some very dramatic and very intense experiments.
And this is where it gets really interesting. We're moving from theory and blueprints to actual human experiences. Where were these tests happening, and what were people reporting from inside these things?
So the setting was primarily deep in the USSR. A lot of the experiments were concentrated in Siberia at places like the Institute of Experimental Medicine.
And the reports.
The reports were nothing short of psychedelic.
We're not talking about quiet meditation here. Participants reported this huge range of effects, both psychological and physiological. On the psychic side, you have claims of heightened telepathic communication. But then it gets into truly unsettling territory.
Yes. Reports included strong out-of-body sensations, intense visions of events happening somewhere else entirely, even what they called precognitive experiences.
Visions of the future.
Visions of what the person perceived as future events, yeah. And to make it even more vivid, people felt strong physical responses. They'd report sudden temperature drops or intense tingling, a heavy feeling of, like, physical displacement.
That level of intensity. I mean, it's just a profound subjective experience, whether it was caused by time energy or just the psychology of sitting alone in a giant aluminum can in Siberia?
Absolutely. One source even mentions these strong emotional swings from sudden, inexplicable euphoria to moments of intense fear and dread.
So whatever was at work, physical or psychological, it was clearly effective at altering consciousness. And to your point about the results, the researchers claimed they had measurable success.
They did. According to the Soviet reports, participants in the mirrors showed improved performance on remote viewing tasks.
What does that mean? Improved performance.
For instance, they claimed subjects could describe distant locations or transmit complex telepathic images at rates that were statistically higher than baseline.
So better than chance.
Much better, they claimed. There was one anecdote that circulated in the West about participants correctly describing the inside of a faraway building down to the placement of the furniture. And that kind of story was compelling enough to keep the money flowing.
Okay, wait, hold on. If they really achieved these reliable breakthroughs, if they were sending telepathic postcards across Russia, why aren't Kozyrev's mirrors standard issue for intelligence agents today? Where does the scientific rubber hit the road?
That is the critical juncture. While the reports were vivid and the initial claims were high, there were two major interconnected problems. First, the theory itself lacks empirical measurement. You can't just pull out a device and objectively quantify time energy.
There's no time energy meter.
Right. And second, and this was crucial for the scientists, the reproducibility of the results was, well, it was inconsistent. They just could not reliably recreate the successful outcomes when they ran the same tests again.
And inconsistency is the death knell for experimental science.
Right.
But you can't separate this from the context, right? This was all happening inside this massive geopolitical chess game.
Absolutely. The Cold War provided the ultimate motivation. The fear that the other side, the KGB or the CIA, was making a breakthrough in psychic warfare that justified enormous budgets for programs that would have been laughed out of the room otherwise.
And the Soviet Union's approach was so physical, they used Kozyrev's mirrors, this external device, to try and amplify the mind.
Yeah.
To build a machine for telepathy.
And that contrasts so sharply with the American approach, which was running in parallel. The U.S. government sponsored Project Stargate.
Right.
They were chasing the same goal, remote viewing for intelligence, but their method was radically different. The U.S. relied on structured mental protocols and rigorous psychological conditioning.
So instead of a giant spiral chamber, the Americans were focused on the inner structure of the mind itself. They were using methods developed at the Stanford Research Institute, specifically controlled remote viewing, or CRV.
Exactly. CRV involved training people to suppress mental noise, giving them geographic coordinates totally blind, and then having them report their perceptions in a standardized, quantifiable way.
So you have the Soviets trying to build a physical lens for time energy, and the Americans focusing on mental training. Two superpowers, same desperate goal.
But just vastly opposing ideas of how to unlock perception beyond the five senses, it just shows the incredible lengths they were willing to go to for any perceived edge.
So, at the end of the day, what did the mainstream scientific community conclude about the mirrors? Were they valid?
The consensus is pretty clear. Kozyrev's experiments are generally labeled as speculative or, more often, pseudoscientific. They relied so heavily on subjective, anecdotal reports.
And they failed that replication test.
Exactly. The claims just couldn't hold up to conventional scientific scrutiny.
And looking across the pond, the American project didn't fare much better in the long run, did it?
That's right. Declassified assessments of Project Stargate concluded that, while remote viewers sometimes produced intriguing data points, the overall intelligence was just too vague and unreliable to justify the expense. The CIA ultimately shut the program down in 1995.
So both the device-driven Soviet approach and the protocol-driven American one, they both ultimately failed to deliver reliable results. Yet the mirrors didn't just vanish entirely. What is their legacy today?
Well, despite the official dismissal, Kozyrev's mirrors maintain this powerful presence. They persist in, let's call them, esoteric research communities, especially in Russia and Eastern Europe.
The people are still building them.
Absolutely. Contemporary experimenters are still building these chambers for meditation, for seeking altered states, for training in remote viewing. They're just operating completely outside of mainstream physics now.
They really stand as this powerful symbol, not just of fringe science, but of the lengths people will go when facing an information vacuum, especially during intense geopolitical pressure.
And that is the final takeaway for you, I think. Whether you want to call them mirror pseudoscience or maybe pioneering, if flawed, early research into consciousness, they remain this important historical artifact. They illustrate that enduring human drive to question the limits of our perception and the very nature of physics, regardless of whether it succeeds by conventional standards.
What a dive. We started with Kozyrev's radical theory of time as physical energy. We mapped the bizarre geometric design of the mirrors, explored the intense, often frightening experiences of the participants, and finished with his dual legacy of scientific dismissal and cultural persistence.
And here's a final thought for you to explore on your own. If the ambition and paranoia of the Cold War drove scientists to ask these fundamental questions about time and consciousness with mirrored geometries, what other elements of physics and perception are we currently dismissing today that might hold the key to understanding how we experience reality?
A truly provocative thought. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.